A bitter winter wind swept across the small streets of Cheyenne, Wyoming, in early January 2004, carrying the quiet tension of a town unaware of the tragedy that had just unfolded. Inside a modest townhouse near the outskirts of the city, 32-year-old Vanessa Monroe, a single mother of a spirited 7-year-old daughter named Claire, had just returned from her evening shift at the local hospital. Vanessa's life had always been defined by routine, long hours caring for patients, evenings helping Claire with homework, and weekends dedicated to volunteering at the community center. She was known by neighbors as kind, dependable, and always ready to lend a hand, the type of woman everyone felt they could trust. That night something changed. Something invisible yet sinister slipped through the cracks of normalcy. Vanessa never returned home. Claire waited at the kitchen table, pencil in hand, unaware that her mother had vanished into the Wyoming night, leaving behind a home now filled with eerie silence and the growing unease of a missing loved one. By dawn, friends and neighbors noticed her absence. Phone calls went unanswered and messages left unreturned. It was unlike Vanessa to disappear without notice. Concern escalated quickly when her car remained in the driveway, and Claire, too young to understand the gravity of the situation, could only whisper to neighbors that she hadn't seen her mom since the night before. The Cheyenne Police Department opened an investigation immediately. Detectives quickly discovered that Vanessa had no enemies, no history of violence surrounding her, and no apparent reason to vanish. Initial canvassing revealed few leads, no sightings, no witnesses, only the unsettling feeling that the perpetrator had vanished into the night just as silently as he had acted. Months passed and the investigation stalled. Leads evaporated, tips proved false, and the trail went cold. Vanessa's disappearance became one of the town's haunting mysteries. The community organized search parties, held vigils, and plastered flyers across gas stations, schools, and grocery stores, but the answers never came. Claire grew older, her questions more pointed, her grief more profound. "Where is my mom?" she would ask, and her father's empty chair at the table was the only answer. For the next 15 years, Vanessa Monroe's case remained in the shadows, buried in the cold case files of the Cheyenne Police Department. Detectives came and went, new cases overshadowing the unresolved disappearance, and yet, somewhere in the quiet, the perpetrator lived freely, blending into society as if nothing had happened. Then in 2019, a breakthrough arrived, not through a witness, not through a tip, but through the quiet revolution of forensic science. Detective Michael Anders, assigned to the cold case unit, had spent years reviewing unsolved disappearances. He approached Vanessa's case with the persistence of someone who refused to accept defeat. Every piece of evidence, no matter how small, can become the key decades later, Anders noted. The turning point came when investigators revisited the original 2004 evidence. A partial DNA sample, collected from a coffee cup found near Vanessa's workplace that had previously yielded inconclusive results, was sent to a specialized lab for advanced genetic genealogy testing. The technique, which had solved dozens of cold cases in recent years, allowed investigators to identify distant relatives of potential suspects, piecing together family trees to narrow down the list of possible perpetrators. Over the course of several months, analysts meticulously traced the genetic connections, cross-referencing public records, census data, and birth certificates. It was painstaking work, requiring patience and precision. By late 2019, their efforts yielded a shortlist of individuals with potential connections to Vanessa Monroe. Among them was Derek Caldwell, a 44-year-old man living in a neighboring county, whose history and location matched several key factors from the night Vanessa disappeared. Caldwell had no prior convictions and was considered a model citizen in his small town. Detective Anders' team acted carefully. Rather than confront Caldwell directly, they followed him discreetly, gathering intelligence on his routines and behaviors. Forensic teams then collected a covert DNA sample from a discarded item, standard procedure in genetic genealogy cases. The results came back within days. The DNA matched the trace evidence recovered from Vanessa's disappearance with near certainty. The revelation sent shockwaves through the department. A man who had appeared so ordinary, so unassuming, had committed a crime that had haunted a community for 15 years. The capacity for some individuals to maintain a facade while hiding something so horrific is almost unimaginable, Anders remarked. The case against Caldwell was solidified when investigators uncovered additional evidence linking him to the scene: digital records, eyewitness corroborations from the night of Vanessa's disappearance, and accounts from associates that placed him in the area. With enough evidence to secure an arrest, the team moved carefully to ensure the operation would proceed without incident. On a frigid morning in February 2020, Caldwell's home was surrounded by law enforcement. Neighbors watched, stunned, as the man they had seen jogging in the park, attending church and volunteering at the local food pantry, was led away in handcuffs. Inside the squad cars, Caldwell's composure remained, a quiet acknowledgement of what had finally caught up with him. In the wake of the arrest, the Monroe family felt a mixture of relief and profound sorrow. Claire, now 21, struggled to reconcile the image of the man arrested with the years of fear, grief, and unanswered questions that had defined her adolescence. "I don't think I'll ever understand how someone could do this," she whispered to Detective Anders. "But at least now, I know the truth." The case would go on to make national headlines. Journalists highlighted the incredible persistence of law enforcement and the revolutionary use of genetic genealogy to solve long-cold cases. Psychologists weighed in on the ability of some offenders to hide in plain sight, maintaining a normal life while harboring devastating secrets. The arrest was a stark reminder that justice can be delayed but not denied. As the investigation unfolded, the community of Cheyenne faced a reckoning. People who had known Caldwell for years felt betrayed. Parents reconsidered who they trusted with their children, neighbors scrutinized the people around them, and local officials discussed new safety initiatives. Yet, amid the shock and the horror, there was a sense of closure, a long-awaited resolution to a mystery that had haunted families and law enforcement for nearly 2 decades. Detective Anders, reflecting on the resolution, noted, "This case shows that no matter how much time passes, truth has a way of surfacing. Families deserve answers, and with persistence and science, even the coldest cases can be solved." Vanessa Monroe's legacy, while tragic, would serve as a catalyst for change. The local hospital established a memorial fund in her honor, aimed at supporting victims of violent crime. Schools incorporated lessons about safety, awareness, and resilience. And for Claire, the knowledge that her mother's case was finally solved brought a difficult, bittersweet closure, proof that even after years of darkness, light can emerge. Before we dive in, remember to like, share, and subscribe. It helps us continue bringing you stories of justice, closure, and the relentless pursuit of truth. The weeks following Derek Caldwell's arrest in Cheyenne brought a flurry of activity that gripped the small Wyoming community. Law enforcement officers, prosecutors, and forensic experts converged on what had once seemed like an unremarkable town, now transformed into the epicenter of a case that had haunted families for nearly 2 decades. Detective Michael Anders, who had dedicated years of his career to solving cold cases, found himself reliving every detail of Vanessa Monroe's disappearance. Each conversation with witnesses, every scrap of evidence, every overlooked lead from 2004 became critical as the team pieced together the final timeline of events. "We had to understand not just how Vanessa was taken, but how someone could hide a crime so meticulously for 15 years, Anders said. Caldwell's background was almost disturbingly ordinary. He had lived in Cheyenne all his life, working as a local handyman, attending church on Sundays, and volunteering at the community center where Vanessa had spent her weekends with Claire. Neighbors described him as quiet, helpful, and polite, someone who never drew attention to himself. Yet beneath this veneer lay a man whose calculated cruelty had allowed him to commit one of the most heinous crimes in recent memory. Investigators discovered that the night Vanessa disappeared, Caldwell had been seen near the hospital where she worked. Surveillance footage from a gas station corroborated his movements, showing him purchasing items that, on closer inspection, aligned with the items investigators later found in connection with the abduction. Witnesses reported seeing Caldwell linger around Vanessa's car after her shift, acting in a way that seemed innocuous at the time, but was chilling in hindsight. The forensic breakthroughs that led to Caldwell's arrest were nothing short of remarkable. The DNA recovered from the coffee cup found near Vanessa's workplace in 2004 had degraded over time, making it unusable with conventional testing. However, advancements in whole genome amplification allowed technicians to recreate a viable profile, which was then cross-referenced in public genetic genealogy databases. It was this innovative technique that ultimately led detectives to Caldwell. When questioned in custody, Caldwell remained composed. His calm demeanor unnerved investigators. It's as if he knew this day would come, yet never fully acknowledged what it meant for the family he shattered, Anders recalled. But it was Caldwell's own meticulousness that became his undoing. Over the years, he had kept evidence of his crime, hidden, subtle, seemingly innocent, that forensic teams were now uncovering. Receipts, photographs, and digital records painted a timeline of obsession and premeditation. As the investigation deepened, the psychological profile of Caldwell emerged. Dr. Elaine Matthews, a forensic psychologist brought in to consult, described a man exhibiting traits of what she termed calculated sociopathy. He was methodical, patient, and capable of maintaining an outward appearance of normalcy while committing acts of extreme violence. He didn't just commit a crime and vanish, Dr. Matthews explained. He integrated himself into the community, watched the grief he caused, and maintained control over the narrative of his life. That's the hallmark of someone who plans with extreme precision and lacks empathy entirely. The team began reconstructing the night of Vanessa's abduction. Using witness statements, digital timestamps, and environmental data, they created a chilling sequence. Vanessa had finished her shift at the hospital around 10:45 p.m. and returned home to make sure Claire was asleep. Surveillance indicated Caldwell had followed her discreetly, keeping just out of sight. Evidence suggested he forced entry into her home through an unlocked back door, a detail he likely knew because of his frequent presence in the neighborhood performing maintenance work. What followed was an encounter that would forever scar the community, the abduction itself. Forensic teams later discovered that Caldwell had attempted to cover his tracks meticulously. He wiped down surfaces, removed potential evidence, and staged the scene to suggest a voluntary disappearance. But imperfections, minute at the time, now provided critical insights. A smudge on a door frame, fingerprints on a cupboard handle, and a faint DNA trace on a discarded item all converged to build an airtight case against him. Meanwhile, the impact on Vanessa's daughter, Claire, was profound. Now a young adult, she had grown up haunted by the unknown. The arrest of Caldwell reopened old wounds but also offered the first glimpse of closure she had ever received. Speaking to Detective Anders, she expressed a mixture of relief and sorrow. "I can finally put a name to the fear I've carried my whole life," she said. "It doesn't erase the pain, but it finally feels like justice is possible." The community's reaction was volatile. Neighbors who had known Caldwell for years expressed disbelief and anger. "We all saw him every day, and he seemed like one of the good ones," one local resident said. "I can't comprehend how someone could hide this for so long." Social media erupted with commentary, as stories of Caldwell's normal life clashed with the reality of his crime. School boards, local charities, and church groups he had been part of grappled with the fact that a man they had trusted had committed such a horrifying act. As authorities prepared for trial, more disturbing revelations surfaced. Caldwell had maintained a digital journal, encrypted and hidden, detailing his obsession with Vanessa and planning for her abduction. He meticulously recorded dates, times, and movements, revealing a mind both obsessive and predatory. Detectives described reading the journal as a descent into a methodical, calculating horror, underscoring the extreme psychological manipulation he had maintained over years. The prosecution began building a case around multiple pillars: the forensic evidence, witness testimonies, Caldwell's own digital footprint, and the genetic genealogy match that had initially identified him. Defense attorneys attempted to challenge the DNA evidence and question the reliability of memory from witnesses recounting events from 15 years prior. Yet, each objection was systematically dismantled by the prosecution, leaving Caldwell with little room to maneuver. Inside the courtroom, the tension was palpable. Families, law enforcement, and journalists filled every seat. Claire sat with extended family, bracing herself for the moment when the man who had taken her mother from her would face justice. The community, still grappling with the betrayal, watched closely. It was a trial that captured not just the story of a single crime, but the broader implications of modern forensic science, community trust, and the persistence of justice over time. Detective Anders, reflecting on the case during a break in proceedings, emphasized the human aspect. These investigations aren't just about evidence and DNA. They're about people, families who have suffered, communities that have feared, and the understanding that truth can endure. Science gives us the tools, but empathy drives us to keep searching, even decades later. The courtroom in Cheyenne on the morning of Derek Caldwell's trial was unlike any the town had seen in recent memory. Local media, national reporters, and families of cold case victims filled every available seat, their collective presence a testament to the long shadow this crime had cast. Vanessa Monroe's daughter, Claire, now 21, sat beside her father, holding his hand tightly. The years of uncertainty, grief, and fear had culminated in this singular moment, facing the man who had stolen her mother from her when she was only 5 years old. Derek Caldwell, 48 years old at the time of his arrest, was brought in under heavy security. Despite the weight of the charges, kidnapping, first-degree murder, and obstruction of justice, he entered the courtroom with a calm, detached demeanor. To some, it was chilling. To others, it was infuriating. He had lived among them for 15 years without suspicion, quietly volunteering at the community center, attending church functions, and appearing the picture of a responsible, harmless man. The prosecution opened with a detailed reconstruction of the events from December 12, 2004, the night Vanessa Monroe vanished. Using surveillance footage, timelines, and witness testimony, they painted a picture of a woman unknowingly stalked by someone who knew her routines intimately. Detectives explained how Caldwell exploited his knowledge of Vanessa's schedule, gained through casual interactions at the community center and local grocery store. He had calculated every step, ensuring he could abduct her without immediate detection. One of the most compelling pieces of evidence came from forensic experts detailing the genetic genealogy breakthrough. Detective Michael Anders, who had led the cold case unit, described how modern DNA technology had identified Caldwell as the perpetrator. "We weren't looking for him in 2004 because no one could have imagined he was capable of such a crime. It wasn't until 2019, when we compared DNA from a coffee cup Vanessa had used at work, that we finally had a lead," he testified. Caldwell's demeanor didn't waver, even as forensic technicians presented the detailed DNA match linking him to the crime scene. Each strand, each trace, each fragment reinforced what Claire and her family had long feared. The defense attempted to cast doubt on the reliability of the DNA analysis, questioning the preservation of evidence over 15 years. Yet expert testimony explained the rigorous methods used to ensure accuracy. From whole genome amplification to cross-referencing against public databases, every step of the forensic process had been meticulously documented. Witnesses came forward, recounting small but significant details they had noticed back in 2004. A neighbor spoke of seeing Caldwell loiter near Vanessa's home, seemingly idle but observant. A coworker remembered seeing him offer Vanessa a ride home after a late shift, something she politely declined. While none of these events had seemed threatening at the time, in the context of the evidence, they revealed a pattern of predatory behavior. But it wasn't just DNA and witnesses that built the case. It was Caldwell's own compulsive documentation of his crime. Investigators had uncovered encrypted digital journals, carefully hidden on an external hard drive, where Caldwell had chronicled his obsession with Vanessa. The entries, dated months leading up to her disappearance, outlined his plans with methodical precision. In court, prosecutors read excerpts that were at once horrifying and illuminating. The meticulous attention to detail, the planning of escape routes, and his reflections on the perfect crime he intended to commit. Claire Monroe's testimony brought a human dimension that statistics and DNA could never capture. Sitting at the witness stand, she recounted the uncertainty and fear she had carried since her mother vanished. "I grew up wondering if she was safe, if she remembered me, if anyone would ever tell me the truth," she said, her voice steady despite tears. "For 15 years, I lived in a shadow. Today, I finally see the person responsible held accountable. That doesn't bring her back, but it gives me a chance to heal." The defense attempted to argue that Caldwell's ordinary life post-2004 demonstrated rehabilitation, pointing to his volunteer work and community involvement. But prosecutors countered with the calculated nature of his deception. Dr. Elaine Matthews, the forensic psychologist, described Caldwell as a master manipulator, someone capable of living a double life for over a decade while maintaining appearances. His actions post-crime weren't proof of reform. They were evidence of meticulous, ongoing concealment. As the trial progressed, graphic details of the crime were presented, revealing the horrors Vanessa had endured. Caldwell had held her captive for several hours before strangling her, attempting to stage her disappearance as voluntary. Investigators explained how the lack of immediate evidence allowed him to evade detection, and how his local reputation as a helpful, quiet man contributed to the community's disbelief. One of the most tense moments in court came during the presentation of Caldwell's interactions with Vanessa's daughter post-crime. It was revealed that he had occasionally been seen at community events that Claire attended as a child. Never suspicious, never noticed, but a chilling reminder of how close the perpetrator had lived without accountability. The psychological impact on the family was profound, and the jury listened in silence as Claire recounted the trauma of growing up without a mother. After weeks of testimony, closing arguments focused on the undeniable evidence, the pattern of predatory behavior, and the need for justice, not just for Vanessa but for the integrity of the community. The prosecutor's words echoed through the courtroom. "For 15 years, Derek Caldwell lived among us, respected, trusted, unnoticed. But today, truth catches up. Justice may be delayed, but it cannot be denied." The jury deliberated for 3 days. Outside the courthouse, local residents, news crews, and family members waited anxiously. When the verdict was finally announced, the courtroom erupted. Caldwell was found guilty on all counts: first-degree murder, kidnapping, and obstruction of justice. The sentence: life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. For the first time in 15 years, the Monroe family could breathe a collective sigh of relief. Detective Anders reflected on the conclusion of the case. "It's never easy to tell someone they'll never see a loved one again, but this resolution shows that persistence, science, and empathy can prevail. It's a testament to families who never gave up hope." Claire, standing with her father outside the courthouse, expressed gratitude to the investigators and community. "We can finally start to move forward," she said. "It won't erase the past, but it allows us to remember my mother as she was, not just as the victim of a crime. That's a gift we've waited 15 years for." The Cheyenne community, though shaken, began to rebuild trust in the wake of Caldwell's arrest and conviction. Law enforcement agencies reviewed cold cases with renewed vigor, inspired by the breakthroughs in forensic science that finally brought closure to Vanessa's family. Local schools held seminars on personal safety and the importance of vigilance, using the Monroe case as a stark, real-world lesson. Vanessa Monroe's story, though tragic, became a symbol of perseverance. The dedication of detectives, the advancements in genetic genealogy, and the courage of a family unwilling to let her memory fade all converged to demonstrate that even the darkest cases can be resolved. In Cheyenne, the name Vanessa Monroe will forever be remembered, not for the horror of her final night, but for the unyielding pursuit of justice that ultimately honored her life.